I am Diana Hill. I'm a clinical psychologist, author of Act Daily Journal, and an expert in eating and weight concerns. And in a lot of ways, I like to see myself as a psychological flexibility guide, in that I work with clients to get unstuck from painful patterns of avoidance and get moving towards a life that has meaning and purpose. I'm really excited to share with you that I am partnering with Pessy on leading a full day training that you can participate in if you're a clinician or a nurse, a social worker that's interested in helping your clients who are struggling with body image and eating concerns. This full day workshop is going to be in December, and you can participate live or you can also watch it on demand. I know we're all busy, and sometimes taking a day out of work to do a full day is hard. So if you want to participate with me live, join me on December 3rd, or you can also sign up and watch it on your own time. So there is a link right down below if you want to sign up for it. And today, what I wanted to do is give you a little bit of a preview, a little bit of a taste of some of the things that we're going to be exploring in terms of ACT's approach to eating and weight concerns. So ACT takes a little bit of a fresh, modern, different approach to an old problem that many of our clients and maybe ourselves have been struggling with, which is the problem of battling with our bodies, the tug of war with food, the challenge of being dissatisfied with our weight and shape, and having that battle really push us around in our lives. My graduate research was in appetite awareness training. So, what that is a cognitive behavioral approach to being able to listen in to your hunger and fullness cues and use those cues to guide your eating. And that was really a doorway for me into becoming interested in some of these more acceptance based and awareness based approaches to healing our relationship with food and weight. I went on to explore dialectical behavior therapy for eating disorders, which again is sort of like a sister to ACT, and really found some of those approaches incredibly helpful in helping my clients navigate the emotional dysregulation that's associated with struggling with food and weight, and have sort of this skills-based model. But it was really ACT that has transformed my understanding of working with clients in this area, because ACT offers an approach that is flexible, that you can show up in with whatever background you're coming to the table with. If you are an art therapist, or you're a Gestalt therapist, or you're a psychodynamic therapist or a CBT therapist, a lot of the principles and approaches to ACT can really apply to working with our clients. I went on to be a clinical director of an intensive outpatient program for eating disorders before going on to private practice. And that's where I really learned about the transformative power of ACT in group work as well as individual work. So you can do things like psychodrama, where you're having a dialogue with your eating disorder or your body critic. And that's an example of one of the core processes of ACT. In the training that I'm going to be offering for you in December, we're going to be breaking ACT down into its 6 core processes that together build your client's psychological flexibility. So if we think about psychological flexibility is your ability to pursue what matters, even in the face of obstacles, even in the face of self-critical thoughts, even in the face of urges, even in the face of difficult family conversations. That is our goal in working with folks that are struggling with their body image and eating concerns. And as we approach the holidays, we might start to hear this a lot in our practice. And I've heard it in my practice, and honestly, also in my personal life. The holidays can be really challenging in our relationship with food and weight. So I'm going to talk to you today about some strategies that you can apply in working with your clients right now, this week, next week, during the holidays, that are drawn from some of these 6 core processes of ACT, so that you can get a little bit of a taste of them and see how they may be helpful to you. And then if you want to take a deeper dive into the Pessy training, I hope that you will join me there. It's going to be experiential. It's going to be hands-on. You're going to get handouts that you can work on with clients. You're going to get a functional assessment that you'll be able to use with clients. You're going to get a committed action plan that you'll be able to work with them in. And then you're also going to be able to take some of your clinical examples and really kind of apply some of these principles to them and get a sense of how it works in your own practice. You're also going to get a chance to talk with other clinicians that are interested in this arena of helping their clients live more meaningful and purpose-driven lives. So it'll be a great community and a wonderful way for us to connect. So the first principle that I wanted to talk with you about today in terms of working within an ACT context in the arena of eating and weight concerns is the use of metaphor. And metaphor has been used in working with recovery from eating disorders and body image for a long time. So even in the work of folks like Anita Johnson, who wrote the beautiful book, Eating in the Light of the Moon, which is all about metaphor and myth and women and food. Metaphor is a beautiful and wonderful way to talk with our clients about difficult topics. It's also a wonderful way to use language to get around language. So some of the basis of acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, is something called relational frame theory. And I'm not going to go into the details of what that is, but it basically goes back to our development of language and how we can get stuck in our own self-story, or even use language as some of the problems, as one of the problems that contributes to our suffering. So with metaphor, you actually get to relate to your client and relate to their experience with a little bit of distance and using language. One of my favorite metaphors is one that we used to use at every friends and family night we do at the intensive outpatient program that I worked at, and it's the log metaphor that comes from Anita Johnson. And in this log metaphor that you could use with your clients, we tell the story of somebody that is going down along a river, and the river gets really, really rocky and really, really rough. And during that rough patch, they grab onto the log. Now, the log in this example is maybe your relationship with food. Maybe it's using overeating to navigate distressing thoughts and feelings. Maybe it's restricting food. Maybe it's in other ways navigating the challenges of this difficult experience. But what happens is the river kind of evens out and you're still holding on to that log. And you start to see that with your clients, whatever their log is, it's not working for them anymore. Maybe in some ways they're coming to work with you because they're so tired of being on a diet and binge cycle. It's been over and over again of dieting to lose weight and then binge eating. That dieting in some ways is their log, and so is the binge eating, right? Letting go of the log is what we're encouraging our clients to do. But we also need to help our clients look at why they would want to let go of the log in the first place. What are the reasons behind letting go? And do some practices of taking little small let goes, little letting go, try out the waters, and then grab back on again. So that example of that metaphor, you could flesh out with a client. What is their log? What would letting go look like for them? What were the waters that they were in when maybe their struggles with food and weight developed? Who is it that's on the shore that they want to swim to, or what is it they want to swim to? And you could flesh out that metaphor without really having to go into the sort of concrete aspects of their disordered eating in a judgmental way, but more of this sort of distanced perspective. I love the use of metaphor because as a clinician, one of the things that you can do is get a metaphor that really fits for your client and then use it over and over again. So I've had clients where we've talked about their eating disorder sort of being like a glove that feels like it fits for them, and they pick it up and they put it on and it feels really good to be in that glove, but the glove also prevents them from feeling the world, right? So that would be a metaphor that I may use over and over again with a client, and we can talk about something without being entangled in it. It's really important when you're using metaphor with clients that you choose a metaphor that fits for them. So, for example, say you have an athlete that's a tennis player, you may use a metaphor like it really feels like we're battling a match back and forth. We're volleying back and forth with your thoughts about food. What would it be like to not return the serve? Right? So, that kind of a metaphor is a quick, easy way to start to get a little bit of distance, look at maybe our thoughts as something that we're battling with, and then how could we do something different? It's also really important when you're working with metaphors to not mix metaphors. So I have sort of a challenge that I've used a lot. I have a challenge of mixing metaphors where maybe I start talking about the tennis metaphor and then I'm mixing it with the log metaphor, and then we all get kind of mixed up. So when you're working with metaphors, you want to choose something that a client could relate to. You want to choose something that you're not mixing a bunch of metaphors so we get all confused in. Keep it simple. That sort of acronym of keep it simple, stupid. I like keep it simple. The keep it simple strategy, KISS, KISS, is really helpful when it comes to metaphors. And then bring the metaphor up over and over again as sort of a bit of a storyline that you can anchor on. So that's one tip that you can use with eating disorders. And I would encourage you, weight and eating concerns, to think about what metaphors you have already used with your clients, how you may be already doing this. If you want to write it in the chat, I always love learning new metaphors. And I think that it really lends itself to be able to have conversations about difficult topics with a little bit of a perspective shift. So that type of languaging and perspective is one of the core processes of acceptance and commitment therapy. And there's 6 of them. As I mentioned, we'll be going through each of those 6 core processes in the workshop that I'm offering, and we'll be playing with them and trying them on and see how they fit. One is perspective taking, helping our clients take an observer self perspective on their self story, on their struggle. Another practice that I find is really helpful in working with weight and eating concerns is the practice of actually, um, instead of battling or saying what they're doing isn't working for them, oftentimes we go straight to problem solving the problem. Taking a moment to appreciate the function of how their relationship with food or how their relationship with their body has served them. In ACT, we call this functional contextualism. There's a lot of like words that are sort of complicated in ACT, and I think it's helpful just to break them down. Functional contextualism. Functional has to do with you're doing this for a reason. It's worked for you. We don't do things for no reason. We have a learning history. Maybe we learned to start restricting our food because at the dinner table when we were kids and our parent was struggling with alcohol. Maybe we learned that if we cozied up and fed ourselves and comforted ourselves with food, then it helped mitigate feelings of shame or trauma or anxiety. So, starting to look at the functional component of whatever is happening with your client, and then the contextual part of it is, and in what context does it show up for you? So when we think about holiday eating, a lot of us are returning back to what Janine Roth calls our refrigerators of origin, right? We're returning back to environments where maybe some of the eating concerns first developed. We're also in social situations where we may experience more social anxiety. We've all been kind of not super since the pandemic, not as social as usual. Maybe these are we don't have the same comfort. We're stepping outside of our comfort zone and looking at, okay, here are some contexts where you may be more likely to use these strategies that have helped you in the past, your log, going back to that metaphor, to get through. Helping your clients start to see what is the function of their maybe overeating, what is their function of blaming their bodies, what is their function of restricting or over exercising, and be able to understand that it's serving a purpose. What is that purpose? In our workshop, we're going to be unpacking this model of seeing that there's often a cue that triggers the eating behavior or the negative body image. There's a behavior that they engage in, which oftentimes has the function of trying to get rid of a difficult feeling, trying to control a thought, trying to get rid of a memory. So it has sort of this avoidance quality to it. And then it has a result. And the result is often short-term relief, but long-term doesn't lead folks to the life that they want to live. So we'll be unpacking how to map out people's sort of experiential avoidance habit loops, the roundabouts of going around and around in this process that isn't really working for them anymore. But for you, it could be helpful just to start to talk with your clients about seeing what their relationship with food and eating is in some ways sort of like this red herring. I live in the Santa Barbara foothills here, and we live in wine country. And when you drive past the vineyards that are biodynamic or have sort of more organic approach to farming, they often will plant a rose bush at the end of each line of grapevines. And I remember asking someone once, like, why is that rose bush there? It's beautiful to see like this line of roses and all these grapevines. And what they told me is that the rose bush is planted there because the rose bush is super sensitive and vulnerable to pests. And so the rose bush will actually show the damage of the either fungus or pest or disease before the vineyards do. And it's a sign, it's a signal, it's an indicator that we need to tend to something here. So sometimes I think about that in terms of our relationship with our body or weight, or when client comes in and says, I feel fat. That in some ways is the rose bush, right? That's the rose bush that's telling us or signaling maybe there's something else going on here. Maybe that I feel fat and I'm uncomfortable about going to this holiday party is really about I feel vulnerable. I'm worried that I won't fit in. I'm worried about what people will think. I'm feeling embarrassed about something. I'm feeling shame. And so if we just take the bush at face value and not really see like what's underneath it, what's the function of that I feel fat. In some ways, it could be just to kind of like if I can control that feeling, then I don't have to feel what's underneath. So I encourage you to look at the function with your clients. And I used a metaphor, if you might notice. And notice how when I use that metaphor, it kind of helped you kind of understand that concept in a different way. The third practice that I think is really helpful that we will be working on in this workshop is one that I use all the time in my own life as a therapist, and that I encourage my clients to use, whether they're struggling with eating and weight concerns or whether they're just navigating the world as a parent, as at work. And it's one eye in and one eye out. And this practice is incredibly beneficial, especially for folks that are struggling with eating and weight concerns, because oftentimes when you're struggling with eating and weight concerns, you're either hyper focused on the inside. Maybe you struggle with anorexia and you're super focused on the feeling of being full. It's really aversive to you. Or super focused on the outside, what's going on around, people pleasing, and completely turning off your hunger or completely turning off your fullness. You don't even notice it. One eye in, one eye out is a strategy that we'll learn to help our clients keep connected with their emotions, with their interoceptive awareness, so their hunger and fullness. I still believe in that model of appetite awareness training, paying attention to what's happening inside, but also having the flexibility to pay attention to what's happening in the world around you. And ultimately, that flexibility, that ability to toggle back and forth, what do I need right now? What's happening for me? What does my body need? What does my spirit and soul need? What does my emotional self need? Right? While also paying attention to a feeling of being interconnected to others is incredibly helpful in recovery. That flexibility of one eye in and one eye out. We'll be practicing that together. I have some wonderful handouts that can help you with helping your clients develop one eye in, one eye out when it comes to food and eating in particular, but also one eye in and one eye out when it comes to movement, right? Reclaiming movement again so that it's not just all about two eyes out and what does this look like, or I'm doing it for some extrinsic reward, but also paying attention to the embodiment of moving in your body and feeling that again and reclaiming it in a flexible, compassionate way. So we'll be talking about all these different skills, but I think that the three that I would suggest that you try out and maybe try on with your clients this week and today as you're going working in your practice, or even thinking about people that are navigating the holidays, is can you come up with a metaphor for their holiday eating, and see if you can use that metaphor to kind of flesh out some ideas and strategies around how they want to approach the holidays. Practice discussing the function of their eating and seeing it as the rose bush, right? And really how it may be serving them. It's a lot easier to let go of something when you have more clarity around how it's serving you and how it's no longer serving you. And then the third part is helping your clients toggle back and forth between listening inside one eye in and paying attention to what's going on outside. So I hope you try out those three. Let me know how they go for you. And I really do hope that you'll join me in December or on demand on your own time to exploring ACT for eating and body image concerns through PESI. Sign up at the link right below. And many blessings to you. Well wishes this holiday season. It's wonderful to be here with you. See you all soon.